Hey, if you're thinking about quitting your job soon or in the future, I would definitely watch this video because it may not exactly be the dream that people make it out to be. Now, I want to say right off the bat, I don't want to be the person that's trying to convince you not to do it and kill that dream because it is amazing in a lot of ways. But what I do want to do is be able to relay some of the lessons and things that I've learned that I wasn't exactly expecting or that I didn't fully understand. Like, when somebody talks about a specific phrase that they throw out there, something you hear all the time, and you kind of hear it, but you don't really know what they're saying. I've now experienced those things, so I do know what they're saying because I can now say it to you and explain what I mean by it. For example, have you ever heard the phrase, it's not a 9 to 5, it's a 5 to 9? That's like a fun little entrepreneur thing to say, is that you're not just working 8 hours a day, now you're working all day, every day. And it's like, kind of sounds like a joke, but it's not. So let's dig into that a little more. Like, when I'm talking about that, what I'm saying is not only do you get to set your own hours, so to speak, like everybody wants to do, but on the flip side, you don't really get to set your hours because, yeah, you can control what time you're working, but if you're trying to build a business and make yourself available, especially in real estate, which is what I'm doing, obviously, you pretty much have to be available 24/7. Like, if somebody needs something in the middle of the night or a deal comes through when you're busy eating dinner, your options are to miss that and fail on the growth of your business, fail on closing a deal or whatever it is, or to treat that like it's the most important thing. Really hard to balance between those two things. So that's the kicker, right? There's no clocking out. Like, there is no stop to the work. I heard Cody Barton talking about this at our mastermind a couple weeks ago, was talking about how, sometimes in a regular job, it's really easy to like measure your targets and hit those targets and be like, oh yeah, I was trying to get this project done by this date and I got that done and now I can kind of chill out a little bit or catch up on my work or whatever. But in entrepreneurship, it's more of a moving target. So like, it's very hard. You have to work at it to be able to feel like you're actually accomplishing things. And that's what Cody was talking about, was kind of the past couple years for him. It's really hard because he feels like he's not accomplishing something. And that's the exact way I feel. Like, when people look at what I'm doing and talk to me about it, they're like, oh yeah, you've come so far, you've done this and that. But in my head, I'm like, I had 100 things that I was supposed to get done this week and I didn't even get half of them done. So I'm way behind. Like, that's what it feels like. It's very hard to get that feeling that you're actually getting stuff done. Instead, it's like you always feel like you're behind because that target is just moving down the road. And so that can be really difficult mentally to feel like you're achieving things, like you're actually accomplishing what you set out to accomplish. Now, the flip side of that is looking at things from a different lens, a different perspective that helps you figure out how you can find those little wins. Because the reality is, if you constantly, and this is kind of how I felt, like if you constantly feel like you're not accomplishing the goals that you've set out to accomplish, it's going to be really hard to keep going. Like, you have to have little wins along the way. And, Alex Hormozi talks about multiple times measuring the little things, right? So like, when somebody comes to me or comes to somebody else and says, oh, I haven't done anything. It's like, okay, well, you got up this morning, you brushed your teeth, you made your bed, you went to the gym. Like, what are the little things that you can measure? And I've tried to take that same principle and apply it into my business to where I can say, hey, hiring a new employee, like, that's a big deal. Some people don't get to do that. And so even though to me, it's like that was not the main thing on my list, it's still a little accomplishment. And the other thing with that is just being able to take the time to kind of look back and say, hey, although it doesn't feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be this week in my own head, if I look back a month, 3 months, 6 months, like, for me, 3 months ago, I still have my job, right? And so my progression to no longer having that job and making more money now, like, that is an accomplishment that I don't think about enough. It's cool even just talking about it. But speaking of that, moving on to the next point is that when you leave a job, you lose an incredible amount of consistency. And that is something that I think is like impossible to understand. Like, people do not appreciate the consistency of a W-2 because they spend so much time complaining about it. But if you actually take the time to look, like, the reason why people stay in their W-2 is because every Friday or whatever, every other Friday, you get a paycheck. And it's usually the same for most people. It's the same every time. So you know how much you're going to make. You know how much you can spend, whatever it is. Like, even if it's not as much money as you want, at least you know that it's going to be there, right? That does not happen for me and for a lot of people that I work with. Like, there is no guarantee of that paycheck. Whether, like when you have a W-2, you could show up for 2 weeks and kind of slack off and just pretend like you're working. Unless you get fired, you're still gonna get paid the same amount, right? But if I took 2 weeks off currently because I don't have a fully functioning business and I'm working in my business, if I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. Like that's the reality of it. But the even less fun side of that is that no matter how hard I work, there's a lot of times where I still don't get paid. And that's what like is hard to comprehend, is like I'm still not getting paid even sometimes when I work my butt off and do everything that I'm supposed to do, but things just don't fall into place. So a lack of consistency can be, like I said, really mentally tough, like to be able to push through those things knowing that, you know, there may be 3 to 6 months, maybe a year that goes by where you either don't make money or don't make the money that you were hoping to be making. And for some people, that's just not acceptable. Like you may not be able to survive on that. And that's really tough. So if you're in your job now, I can't stress enough, like having the peace of mind to know that money is coming in can be one of your greatest superpowers. And people talk about it all the time. Like it is way too glorified quitting your job right now to where people are not taking the time to recognize how many benefits you can have. Like if you take all of the money that you've saved up in your job and you put it into an investment, for example, and that investment fails, you'll just be able to go make more money. Like you still have money coming in. Yeah, obviously it wouldn't be ideal, but you still have money coming in, right? If I take all the money I made and put it into what I'm working on, you know, put it into flipping a house or whatever, and that money goes to zero, like that was my business. Like my money has gone away, and it's not like, well, now I'll just work another week and the money will come back in. Like those ebbs and flows are way more drastic. And that is another thing that just is not appreciated enough about your job. So if you do have a job right now and you're looking to get into investing, I would encourage people, I would encourage my former self, which I did to a degree back when I had my job, was take advantage of that transition where you can be learning and not necessarily making a ton of money and building that foundation while still getting paid. And that's a superpower. Now, another one that I definitely did not think about when I was at my job was the peace of mind when you have the ability to essentially to blame someone, honestly, or have somebody to fall back on. Like when I blew a project, made the wrong decision, whatever it was, yeah, I might get some backlash, but like there's a stop to that. Like it can only go so far, whether you get reprimanded or even if you get fired. Like somebody thinks getting fired is the worst thing. Well, try owning your own business and getting sued, right? Like it can get a lot worse. Things can go a lot more downhill than that. So having those things to fall back on, like, you know, if I made a bad decision, I had a team behind me supporting me, or, you know, if something fell apart and we weren't sure what was going to work out, like I could go home that night and still feel normal because I know that my job is essentially, or at least the way I treated it, was just to show up to work the next day and do my best within that allotted time slot to solve the problem or get better, whatever it is. But like, if I blow something up here, I'm probably not going to bed tonight. Like, because there's nothing else to fall back on. Nobody else is gonna help me out of this situation. And speaking of no one else to help you, this is like a huge fallacy that I had was, and I think a lot of people have this mindset where they think that they just need their big break, right? Like, if I just do this long enough, I'm gonna have my big break. I'm gonna meet some famous person that's gonna take me under their wings and mentor me and make me $1 billion. And, you know, it sounds like I'm joking, but like that's a very, like I've had that thought all the time is, you know, how can I get around people that will heighten my chance of getting lucky, so to speak, but assume that'll never happen. Like assume that you're never going to get your major break, because that's just not the reality of life. Like you don't just get these big breaks. These big breaks that people see are a result of you putting in the work that is required to get the job done. So take that as a positive, a negative, or a little bit of both, right? Nobody's gonna bail you out, but you also have the ability to control your own freedom, and that can be positive in some senses, but also really difficult. And speaking of difficulty, that brings me to another major aspect of me quitting my job, which is the fear of the unknown. I think it's a pretty common thing for people in some manner to be fearful of what they don't know, fearful of what may happen in the future, fearful of what may happen as a result of the past. Like, I think that's a normal human interaction to have. But, you know, I was talking to Munif Saza the other day and brought that up, how I oftentimes feel that fear of the unknown. And his great response to that was that if I'm constantly afraid of the unknown, then running my own business, being an entrepreneur, probably isn't the field for me. And I think that was great to hear. And I also would echo that now to other people. Like, you have to be willing to be pretty unprepared for what's coming. And I don't even exactly know how to explain how to go about that, because I'm in the midst of it right now. Like, all I can say is, you know, the reaction to how things are going. Like, I saw this video the other day that was talking about how the best reaction you can have when things go wrong, when things aren't going your way, is to just say good. Like, this is great. And it's so not natural that it will confuse people. But, you know, the more that you look at those things as a good thing, because you know that means you're going to grow and learn and kind of build your resume, toughen your skin when it comes to that stuff, it's all a positive. And so a fear of the unknown is just, it's a way to cripple yourself and stop yourself from moving forward to where you want to be. Because the reality is, you're never going to know everything. You're never going to know how to handle every situation, right? We talk to people and coach people all the time on how they're talking about these hypothetical scenarios, and it's like, you can spit hypothetical scenarios for years, but the only way to actually know how to solve them isn't to ask somebody else what they did and get their exact breakdown. It's to just go into these situations, mess them up, and then figure out how to solve them. And that's how you deal with that stuff. But all that being said, like, the fear of the unknown is very real. Like, I feel that all the time. I don't really know what my next steps are in this. Like, I don't know what my next steps are with doing YouTube videos. I don't know what my next steps are in my business. I don't even know if I'm in the right business. Like, I don't know anything really. But the one thing that I can say I do know is that the only way to fail is to stop. The only way to fail is to stop trying. And so if I continue putting my best foot forward, continue fighting through this stuff that I'm not enjoying, that's very uncomfortable, I know that even if the destination isn't the one that I have in my mind right now, I'm going to get to whatever the destination is and enjoy the journey along the way. And then the last one that I've talked about a little bit before, and I think this will connect with different people in different ways, especially people that maybe worked from home during COVID, which I did not. But just a big thing in my transition out of work and working for myself, at least right now when you're getting started, is that it can be super lonely. Like, working from home and not interacting with people, you don't, or I didn't appreciate enough like what human interaction means. Like, people will come home, you know, from work and complain about Susie at work or whatever. But what they don't realize is that, you know, that constant complaining and their interactions at work are actually a positive on their life. Like, they enjoy those interactions and maybe even those fights or discussions or whatever it is, because you just have human interaction. Like, that's something that we all need. And to be quite honest, like, I don't have a lot of that right now. Like, I'm sitting here talking to a camera, right? So that's what my life looks like right now, is it is really lacking that. It's pretty lonely, like sitting in here all day. There's a ton of work to get done, and staying busy is one of my solutions. But when you go from, you know, if you work at a company where you see 50 people a day, and even if somebody just walks past you and says, hey, how was your weekend? How's your day going? Like, people don't do that for me, right? I don't have those interactions, and that's tough. And there's definitely solutions to it that I need to get better at, like going to co-working spaces, which I'm working on trying to figure out, and getting more involved with, like, getting in more Zoom meetings, going to more meetups and all those things. And eventually, hopefully, our company gets built into something where I do have more of that interaction with people, whether it's in person or not. But the reality when you're getting started, again, is that unless you're joining another business, which is a separate thing, but if you're starting your own thing, like, it is going to be lonely. There's going to be a period where, you know, you may not know a ton of people that are doing what you're doing. And so, you know, your former friends or colleagues or whatever aren't going to be super helpful on pushing you into this new journey. But the people that are kind of way ahead of you, you're not really connected with yet. Like, you're not really into what they're doing. And so you're not going to have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of necessarily and learn from, and just, like I said, just interact with. Like, even if it's just basic interaction, like talking with somebody when you're eating lunch. Like, I think for most people, that's a pretty basic human need. But it is something that can be really difficult, and I think you have to be really intentional to find that when you're working for yourself and quitting your job. So if you're like a lot of people that talk to me, you know, on the phone and ask me about what I'm doing or how they can do the same, my biggest encouragement would just be, take all the things that I just talked about and recognize that there is always a positive and negative to every situation. And there is a ton of positives to having a W-2. Like, even if you come home every day and say you hate your job, the reality is you may hate certain aspects of your job, but I'm pretty convinced that most people don't actually hate everything about their job. Otherwise, they certainly wouldn't be there, because there is a lot of positive that comes out of it, and a lot of things like the peace of mind that I talk about that people don't even recognize, like, until it's gone, right? And so if you have a job now, like, and you're looking to get out of it, just recognize that saying, oh, I want to get out of it as quick as possible, like, that's not the way to go about it. The way to go about this is to figure out what you really want, figure out what you enjoy, figure out what you want to try. Maybe it's not even something that you know you're good at or not, but you're just ready to start trying it. And just start to dabble in that stuff. Like, try it out. You know, there's plenty of time in a day. Like, when I was working my job, you know, I was pretty much doing what I do now full time and working full time. And it's really, I mean, yeah, it was a lot of work, but it's not impossible. Like, you have the time to do that stuff. And so taking the time to realize that and say, hey, you know, I want to try and get into real estate. Like, that doesn't mean you have to quit your job. Just go start making some phone calls after work, send some emails out, you know, talk to some people that are doing it. Like, you can dabble with this stuff without just absolutely burning the boats. A lot of people like to burn the boats, and I'm not going to tell you not to do that. I'm just saying, recognize that, you know, you may be convinced because you saw this video or saw some video on YouTube of somebody doing what you want to do, that that's the right path for you. But 3 months down the road, you're like, everything I just talked about, right? You're like, dude, this is lonely and nobody is helping me and I have no idea what's going on and this is not for me. Well, wouldn't it be a lot better if you realize that stuff and you still have your other job? Like, even if you don't enjoy it, at least you have something to hold you over while you figure out what the next step is. Like, take advantage of those things. They're really important to be able to utilize and learn from while you're figuring this stuff out. So that's my encouragement. Before you quit your job and decide that, you know, this just is exactly what you want to do, this is the perfect scenario and I hate where I'm at. Like, you don't hate where you're at. You may not want to do it for the rest of your life, but enjoy the journey of getting to the next step. Don't try and force that to come upon you, because all this stuff I just talked about is going to be 10 times worse if you don't at least have a foundation of people and an awareness of the positive and negatives to what you're doing. So stick with your job for now if you have one. If you don't, that's great too. Would love to hear about some of maybe your positive and negatives, because obviously I'm only 3 months out from my job, and so I'm still, like, I'm in the midst of learning all this stuff and figuring it out. But if you have a job, start figuring out what you think that next thing might be and work on it. Like, there's so many people that say, oh, you know, I really want to get into real estate. And it's like, okay, what did you do for that? Well, I watched a YouTube video 6 months ago. Like, if you actually want to do something, just prove it by your actions. Go do it, and then you can experience it and figure out if it's something you want to pursue. And after you've taken the time to develop those thoughts, develop those experiences, then you'll know if you actually want to push forward with that and kind of take it to the next step. But you don't have to just take the huge leap right off the bat. Take your time with this stuff, enjoy the job that you have, enjoy the freedoms and the consistency and the peace of mind that it allows you while you figure everything out. And that way, when you do or don't decide to take the jump, you'll be confident you made the right decision. Good luck with it.